Hi, you've clicked onto the Tropical Tidbit for Tuesday, August 23rd, 2016. The thoughts expressed in this video are mine alone, and in making decisions, please always consult the National Hurricane Center and National Weather Service. While the Atlantic remains active, and just quickly touching on Tropical Storm Gaston has continued to form, has earned a name, and will likely continue to strengthen over the next several days. The official forecast takes it out to the northwest and largely out of the way of any land areas out into the middle of the Atlantic, and no threat right now. We have Fiona here downgraded today to a remnant low. This is a very small and weak little vorticity maximum here spinning away, and this is expected to drift west and perhaps get entrained into the pattern that 99L will be moving into over the next several days. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any kind of interaction between the two, but right now Fiona, or Fiona, is a very small and delicate feature compared to 99, and it will likely not be a dominant player in the days to come, but it will be interesting to watch nonetheless, as it could add a slight degree of uncertainty to the pattern in this area here. Now, if we look at 99L a little bit more closely, this is obviously the feature of interest right now, as it is the threat to land at the moment. If we zoom in on the system today, we've seen, again, kind of sporadic but modest convection throughout the day during the diurnal minimum, and this has contributed to some slight improvement in the structure of the wave. It's now oriented northwest to southeast, with the northern end of the wave having a lot of vorticity or spin underneath it. You can see the strong southeast trade winds coming in from the right-hand side, but then on the left-hand side you can see some north-northwesterly winds in the low levels along the island chain right now. We can see that in the surface observations with Guadeloupe right now showing a north-northwest wind, and Dominica earlier had a north-northwest wind as well. Recon also flew in there today, and the plane did find north-northwest winds on the western side of the wave as well. So what we have is southeast winds coming in from the right-hand side, north-northwest on the left. What this means is somewhere in the middle it's turning very sharply here, and so we have this area of very sharp curvature and thus spin in the wind field on the northern end of the wave. And so this is the healthy end of the wave right now. There is some spin down here on the southern end of the wave, but it is mostly mid-level, and although we do see some northwest winds north of Barbados here, it seems that the southern end of the wave is a little bit weaker than the northern end of the wave. And this is important because the eventual formation or development of this wave into a tropical storm depends largely on how strong it is right now, how strong it will remain over the next couple of days, because it has to get through the next couple of days before it can develop much further. Right now, the mid-level center being down to the south is displaced from the area of largest low-level spin. So if the surface center is here, the mid-level center is here, they are not stacked vertically. And this is normally a sign that these systems will struggle for a while because they have to become more compact. Right now it's elongated. It has to become more circular, compact, and vertically stacked in order to have appreciable development. That normally takes some time, especially in this area of the Atlantic right here near the Lesser Antilles. These waves typically do look like this. In fact, Earl had some kind of an appearance like this with a little bit of decoupling when it was in this area just last month, and normally it takes them a couple days to get their act going when they look like this in this area. But the key for whether it will have a chance later is how strong it is now, and a key to that is how the European model is seeing the next day, just the next 24 hours here, showing this vorticity maximum coming from the northern end of the wave. If we compare that to how strong the GFS has the wave tomorrow morning, we see it's much weaker than on the European, which is a lot stronger here. And based on the current trends that we're seeing from satellite and from the Recon mission, it appears that the European may be a little bit more correct here on how strong the northern end of the wave is. This plays a key role in the two models' forecasts, because the European, with the stronger system here, has it able to survive until Thursday. You still see a little bit of spin left, and then Friday you can still see it spinning away in the Bahamas, and then finally on Saturday the environment becomes more favorable and it begins to strengthen into a tropical storm in the Bahamas by the weekend. If you compare that to the GFS, it starts out weaker, so then the next day it also remains weak, still weak on Friday, and then by Saturday you see there's nothing here compared to the European, which has a tropical storm developing. So the difference here is in the short-term strength of the wave and whether it can survive long enough to get to a more favorable place for development, because the Lesser Antilles is usually not a good area for these waves to develop. But once it gets in here, things might get a little easier. However, that's not the end of the story. We talked yesterday about several things going on in the environment. One is this old front that you can see here in the northwest Atlantic. This is currently lagging behind an old upper level trough that's very thin here, and I'll show it to you on the model field. It'll be easier to see. On the GFS, initialization, this is the analysis essentially from the model from this afternoon, showing in orange here this elongated trough that you could kind of see on satellite imagery. And note how it's tilted over flat here. Normally you see troughs oriented kind of north to south, but this is oriented east to west, and this is called a PV streamer. And when this 99L moves toward that, there are several things that can happen. One option is that this can end up shearing 99L pretty badly by forcing upper level flow over it and shearing the thunderstorms away from the surface center. That may happen. However, PV streamers in this orientation are very easily fractured. They can break into pieces that begin to retrograde west and other pieces that begin to move east. And if this tropical system can move up between some of those fractured pieces, sometimes it can be a more favorable environmental loft for development, but it usually only works if the system is able to generate substantial convection around itself, and that will only happen if the system is strong enough to generate that convection, namely as strong as the European has it here. If the GFS is right and it's too weak, it won't be able to generate that convection, and this upper level trough here will likely shear it over the next few days. Now there's this first trough, but then there's a second trough up to the north here, and this is the one we actually talked about yesterday. So if we go out a couple of days to Friday morning, you see the second trough come down. The first one is already kind of fractured and dissipated here, but the second one comes down out of the north from the mid-Atlantic area. Here's 99L on the model. And we talked yesterday about how behind this second trough comes a burst of dry air from the mid-latitudes, and this dry air may infiltrate the area just north of the Bahamas, and if this gets entrained into 99L's circulation, it may impede development in this area. However, some model runs have been suggesting that this dry air will stay just to the north in this area here, allowing an area of moisture to consolidate down near the Bahamas. This is what the European shows, that 99L is strong enough to take advantage of this upper level environment, generate convection, and this dry air stays at bay up here. If that occurs, then development chances increase for 99L in the Bahamas, and the European model has now had several runs in a row indicating some development. This usually lends some confidence in that scenario if we get that consistency from the European model. And here's the 500 millibar pattern from the European ensemble showing a big ridge in 5 days on Sunday over the weekend. So the system would be in the southeast Bahamas by Friday, and then it moves into this area on the model, on the ensemble mean, by Sunday. And the bottom line here is that with a big ridge over the mid-Atlantic states, pretty consistent in most of the forecasts. Something that does form in the Bahamas is likely to be a threat both to the Bahamas and to the southeastern United States as well, and perhaps the eastern Gulf of Mexico in the long term. No details can be known at this point, but it is becoming a little more likely now that development may occur, and the National Hurricane Center has increased their odds of that happening to 70% over the next 5 days. And if something does form in here, this pattern would favor a turn generally toward the west or west-northwest in general, something that would have to be watched in this area of the world, and interests in these areas may have to start keeping an eye on this if it moves north of Hispaniola and does indeed start showing signs of development later this week. So overall, again, Fiona has dissipated, Gaston not likely a threat, moving out into the middle of the Atlantic, but 99L, as disorganized as it has been, may have enough behind it to survive long enough to get into an area where development may be more likely in a few days. Details yet to be ironed out if that does occur. It is not yet a guaranteed scenario, but it is becoming a little more likely today, and we'll know more obviously as time goes on. Right now the imminent threat is for heavy winds and potential for very heavy rains and flooding in the Lesser Antilles tonight and tomorrow, getting into the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and perhaps Hispaniola within the next couple of days. And if this gets into the Bahamas, we'll be watching carefully, as the pattern would be such that a storm that does form in here would threaten land and most likely the United States. So we'll keep a close eye on this. Please stay tuned to the National Hurricane Center and your local weather office for the latest information. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.